I did want to quickly start though with what happened in Washington earlier this week. We've been asking lawmakers about their reaction to it. Your thoughts as you watched the riot take place up on Capitol Hill?
Well, I think what we saw is attack on democracy, plain and simple. Everybody's entitled to their own opinion. 4 years ago, Donald Trump became president, and those of us who recognize that he did not win the popular vote didn't simply, plot to take over the Capitol. We accepted that this is our process, and we organized to be ready in the 4 following years. So to see this type of attack on our capital is an attack on our own government, on democracy. It is clearly domestic terrorism, in my opinion. I'm glad that the federal authorities are looking at charging individuals that they can identify. But you can't go into anarchy when you just don't get your way. So we had an election. We were committed to making sure that that election was as inclusive as possible, and we have to live with the results of that, and that's democracy. So I was disappointed to see it, and I think anyone who cares about our government and democracy would also speak out against that type of violence. And I am, I'm really looking forward to the country and the state coming together to start to get back to doing the work of the people that we represent.
Now, obviously, I understand as a state lawmaker, you can't do much about what happens at the national capital, but there was a call by state Democrats, a call for resignations and so forth. Can you fill me in on your position on that?
You mean,
Fellow,
I'm sorry?
I'll ask the question again. I beg your pardon. There was a call for resignations by state Democrats, just sort of a call to action, including one of your fellow assembly members on the other side of the party. Can you speak to that a little bit? What the expectation is?
Well, when you say resignations by who? By the president, or by members of the legislature? I think it's a different conversation depending on who we're talking about.
Well, I think specifically, I was Annie Black was at the rally, and she was included on a list of folks that Nevada Democrats say should step down. I guess, can you elaborate more on the concerns or the thoughts you have on her and other Republicans taking part in what happened yesterday?
Well, to what extent they took part, we don't know. I'm going to get ready for session. I'm going to get ready to do the work for the people of our state. To the extent that we get more information about any individual who was involved in rioting or damaging property or breaking into the Capitol, I've yet to see that. I'm going to plan on getting ready for session. Going to Washington, D.C. Is one thing, breaking into the Capitol is another. And so we're going to get ready for session and focus on the things that help us operate as a state. And if we get more information that indicates that any individual was engaged in unlawful activity, I think that we have precedent that the legislature is the only entity that can judge the qualifications of our own members. And so we'll have a conversation if more information is provided that I think shows any criminal activity.
Okay. Well, let's talk about the legislative session. There's a lot on the menu. Let's just start with the top priorities that you have when the session gets underway.
Well, look, at the top of the list for me is making sure that we have an environment where we can conduct the business of the state in a safe way. And that means keeping members safe, keeping staff safe, keeping any stakeholders and members of the public that may engage in the process safe. I think that this is a struggle that many states are having with how to accomplish that. I think, what we have seen happen in other states is concerning. And so that's going to probably weigh into how we function. But that's going to be our number one priority, is making sure we have an environment where we can do our business safely. Obviously, Nevada has been one of the hardest hit states in the country with this pandemic. It has, really significantly crippled our budget. And we already made some tough decisions and cut our state budget by 30%. And that's a state budget that was already one of the most lean in the country. So we're going to have to, live within our means and deal with a further budget, restraints. And then beyond that, I think our priorities are going to continue to be helping Nevada come out of this pandemic and this economic downturn. So that means making sure that folks have access to healthcare. If our folks are sick, then that's not going to help our economy turn around. And then we're going to have to look at trying to protect jobs, hopefully replace many of the jobs that have been lost, and make sure that we have an environment where, as the economy turns around, I think our economy can grow with it. We're still going to be looking at diversifying our economy. We are seeing right now that an economy for a state that lives primarily on a couple of different industries is not the way to responsibly budget moving forward. So I think we're going to have to look at diversifying our economy, broadening the sources that we rely on to provide our community's basic needs. That includes dealing with education. We worked really, really hard to increase per pupil spending, only to get sued and have that in jeopardy. And then we also are having our families and children struggling with distance learning. So we got to get them back in the classroom. We got to do it safely. So, I think at the forefront, those are the things that we're going to be looking at in the immediate future. We obviously have redistricting to do. We're not going to have numbers, it doesn't appear, in time to complete that process during session, but we will certainly start that process and be ready if we have to carry it over beyond regular session to do the job that I think the Constitution mandates that we do.
Just getting back quickly to the funding, obviously we know why the funding deficit exists. I feel like every legislative session, it's always, there's never enough money to go around. What are you going to do? That's sort of standard practice. Obviously, these are unusual circumstances. But the money that's come from the federal government, how much of it has been used? What hasn't been used? And where's it going?
Well, the way that we got the federal dollars that we did receive through the CARES Act has been at the discretion of the executive branch on how they spend it. So we did form a subcommittee so that we could ask those very questions about use. At the last meeting of the subcommittee, it was made clear that the money was either already used or had been slotted to be used for said purposes by the end of the year, only to find out by the end of the year that there were extensions being granted. But for most states, it was too late for that because they had already made it clear that those dollars had to be expended by the end of the year. So I believe all of those have been expended or are already slotted primarily to deal with the distribution of vaccines. We are still hopeful that there will be additional federal aid coming. Obviously, that has not happened thus far, and it's been a disappointing process. But we, as Nevada, get less of a return on our investment in the federal government than most states, and so especially because we have been so much worse hurt by the pandemic as a state, we certainly are still hopeful that through leadership of Senator Catherine Cortez Masto, who's been a fearless fighter for us, and our other members of our Nevada delegation, that we'll continue to fight for some support from the federal government to get additional support. But we are not returning any of that money back to the federal government. We have needs still to meet for our state.
Are you satisfied with the explanations from the executive branch of how the money has been spent?
Well, look, we would, I don't envy the governor. The governor has worked very hard to try to listen to experts, both in the state and nationally. I'm not privy to the information that he and his team are, so I'm not going to second guess him in the decisions that he's had to make. It's my job to continue to try to help my constituents get the services they need, and I don't envy anybody in a position of having to make the decisions that the governor's had to make. I don't think it's fair to second guess it, but I'm not privy to the information that he is that has guided the decisions that he's making. We just got to continue to communicate with the public about what's going on so that they have confidence that we are continuing to put their needs first.
Just to backtrack, isn't one of the lawmakers' jobs to second guess what happens anywhere? Is that kind of the job? Not to be overly critical, but I mean, second guessing is kind of part of the job sometimes.
Well, I think second guessing is not, I don't think that that's what we do. I mean, I think that's maybe a cynical view of what the legislative process is. We do look at the previous biennium and make policy decisions moving forward. And we made a policy decision to allow the governor to distribute this money based on the fact that he was privy to information that very few are about what was going on in the country and in our state. So moving forward, these are federal dollars. These were not state dollars, and these were not dollars for the most part, other than work programs that were given to the legislature to distribute. So we don't have authority over that pot of money, and we're going to work with the things that we do have authority over to shape our policies moving forward. And to the extent that that involves reviewing what has been left on the table, what hasn't been addressed, either because the CARES dollars were limited in how they were doled out, or because we just have remaining needs that need to be met, we will continue to look at those.
I remember over the summer, you and Attorney General Ford and others were over at the Grant Sawyer building discussing racial injustice, police reform during the Black Lives Matter protests. How much of that discussion will stretch into the legislative session? I know it was discussed at the special session to some extent, but what do you want to see discussed when all the lawmakers are back up in Carson City?
Well, I still think that we're going to have some discussions about social justice and about community policing and just ideas on how to best, protect the public. I am committed to making sure that all of our stakeholders are at the table, including the law enforcement community. I think that we avoid unintended consequences when we have everybody at the table. But I do think that there are still ways that we can better police our community, better provide criminal justice more efficiently. And I think, there are some ways that we use money that might not be the most efficient or the wisest way to use money, whether it's how we treat traffic tickets, how we look at the cash bail system. I think, continuing to look at crime and punishment and whether or not we are being smart with our resources and incarcerating the most dangerous individuals, but not wasting taxpayer dollars housing people that don't pose a risk of harm to the community. So those are conversations we'll continue to have, but we'll certainly have them with law enforcement at the table.
Or people who have been paroled and still have not gotten out of the state prison system for one reason or another.
Right.
What conversations, or have you had any conversations leading up to this session with Sheriff Lombardo, for example, other law enforcement leaders across the state about union members, about trying to put this into action?
I have absolutely had conversations. I was just on the phone with the sheriff a couple of days ago, and one of his members of his administration and I have a working relationship and are committed to reconnecting next week to just talk about where we are and where we can find common ground. I have asked them, tell me, what is it that would help you better meet the community's needs, meet your agency's needs, and let's see if we can find a way to help you do that. So, for example, if we're going to make any criminal justice adjustments to save money, I have no problem with earmarking some of that savings so that law enforcement is better able to police the community. So those are conversations that we've had, we'll continue to have. I think that the conversation with the police union has unfortunately become far more political and partisan than I think it warrants. And so we're going to work on that. I've committed with them to meeting with them weekly during session, and I'll follow through on that to hear them out and make sure that those perspectives are reflected in the policy discussions.
Just to quickly wrap up here, and you and I both, you discussed this at the beginning, this is going to be a difficult legislative session. In your experience in public service, just how challenging is the task for you and all lawmakers to get the business done, given the limited resources, and also just given the circumstances of the pandemic?
It's going to be incredibly difficult. I don't know that I am aware of any session that has presented the kind of challenges that we're facing right now. We're facing challenges with respect to the tough budget decisions that we're going to have to make. But we're also facing, I think, political challenges about rhetoric and about how we're going to govern and how we're going to lead. I have always said that I believe there's power both in the majority and in the minority in crafting policy. And I think that we all are going to have to put partisanship aside at times and either advance policies that we think are good for the state, or mitigate policies that we think maybe aren't so good for the state. And if any part of the machine walks away and doesn't participate in that, I think we're doing a disservice to Nevada. So I am hopeful that the four leaders of our four caucuses can continue to talk. I do have good working relationships with both Minority Leader Robin Titus as well as James Settlemeyer over in the Senate, and we'll continue to extend an olive branch to have those conversations. I suspect there are going to be fewer bills overall because of some of the structural limitations that we may experience based on COVID. And so we're going to really have to focus on the nuts and bolts of state functioning and meeting our state's basic needs. And there are going to be some issues that are going to have to wait for a subsequent session to be dealt with.
I'm out of questions.
All right.
Sir, I appreciate the time, and good luck up in Carson City. We'll be in touch.
Thank you so much, John. Take care. Be safe.
Take care. Have a good day.